when you listen to a football game on the radio, then you have the play-by-play announcer telling you exactly what is happening on the field. But then you have the color commentator or the analyst who, in between the plays, will explain everything to you. And that's the way it is in the book of Revelation. You have the perspective down here on earth, the play-by-play during the tribulation period, but then the scene switches to heaven, and you have heaven's explanation or reaction to it, and then it goes back to earth and back to heaven. You can trace the whole book of Revelation with this undulating pattern of earth and heaven, earth and heaven, earth and heaven, and it teaches us that this planet doesn't make any sense. It doesn't even now, unless we look at it from the perspective of God and from the Bible.
I mean, that makes that clears so much up for me on how, who's looking and who's speaking and who is this directed to. But let's just dive into those 50 next events, those 50 final events of world history. Where do we start?
Well, chapter 1 of Revelation is an introduction. Chapters 2 and 3 are miniature messages, small messages, to the 7 original churches who are the recipients of Revelation, so that they will be strong as they convey the information to others. The part of the book that deals with the future starts with chapter 4. And from 4 all the way through, we are dealing with things which have not yet happened. Chapters 4 and 5 are about the celebration in heaven. Chapters 6 through 11 tell us about the first half of the tribulation. Chapters 12 and 13 tell us about the middle of this 7-year tribulation. Chapters 14 through 18 tell us about the last half of the tribulation. Chapter 19 is the return of Christ, and the remaining chapters are about eternity. So we have this layout, a linear layout of the events one after the other, and I've just gone through and numbered them, so that I can help make track of the events that we can expect to precede the second coming of Christ.
Wow. Robert, just hearing you kind of talk about, how it's all broken down, and it does really kind of simplify it and give it a perspective. But let's say, what if somebody is just, it's their first time reading the Word of God, first time really getting into Revelation? Would you encourage them to is there a specific part in Revelation that maybe would be best for them to start at and study out to kind of get a good gist of what, the whole book is about and what we should be studying there?
Yes. Chapter 1 is a wonderful introduction. John introduces the book, the background, and then he has the first vision in the book is when John sees the glorified, majestic Jesus as he is right now. And that's chapter 1, and it's just a wonderful thing to read. The last 2 chapters of the Bible, 21 and 22, are all about what we call heaven, the new heavens, the new earth, the city of New Jerusalem. I take these literal. I take everything in Revelation literally, unless it obviously is symbolic, and there are symbols in Revelation, but usually the symbols are interpreted for us, so we're not trying to guess what the meaning is. But the first chapter, the introduction, and the last 2 about where we'll be spending eternity, it's like getting a tour guide to a city you're going to visit and reading through it. And those are the most glorious chapters in Revelation. In between are the things that are going to unfold before we get, ultimately, before the whole human race, those who know Jesus Christ get to heaven.
Robert, the big event for Christians is the rapture. That's the event we want to hear about. That's the event we want to know when it is. And you talk about the 3 different theories or other thoughts about the rapture. Could you dive into that and what those are?
Certainly, Tom. When Paul describes the rapture, he does so in Revelation and I'm sorry, in 1 Thessalonians 4 and in 1 Corinthians 15. And it's not just the rapture, it's the resurrection of the saints. The rapture and the resurrection, the graves will be empty, and we who are alive and remain will be caught up with the Lord together in the clouds to be with the Lord in the air. Now, John, in the book of Revelation, never uses that language. He never uses Paul's terms. So we have to say, where in Revelation does this fit? And my belief, my preferred belief, is it occurs at the beginning of the tribulation, which would be in chapter 4. So the church is raptured at the beginning of chapter 4. The rest of the events take place as history unfolds on earth until Christ comes and his feet set down again. Other people believe that the rapture occurs in the middle of the tribulation, and other people believe that the rapture and the resurrection are synonymous with the second coming of Christ at the end of the tribulation in Revelation 19. Now, I believe all three of those views are plausible, but I lean pretty solidly towards the first one.
Thanks for Dr. Morgan. We're just like breaking down the different things of the rapture, but can we talk about the tribulation? There's so much in there about the tribulation. Can you share like what it is? Because some people may not be familiar yet. Are we experiencing some of those tribulation moments even now in our current state of what we're living in?
Very good question, Sydney. The answer is Jesus said, in this world you will have tribulation. Tribulation just means trouble or distress. So we are in a world now in which both globally and personally we experience trouble and distress. But Jesus said that there is coming a day of tribulation such as the world has never seen before and will never see again. And this is what is described between chapters 4 and 18 in the book of Revelation. Now, according to the book of Daniel, chapter 9, verse 27, and I go into this in my book, but that verse tells us that this tribulation will be 7 years in duration. When you read Revelation, it says for 3.5 years, these things are going to happen, and then something dramatic is going to happen, and there will be a final 3.5 years. And we call that the Great Tribulation. So the tribulation is the 7 years, and it's described by that time frame both in Daniel and Revelation, the 7 years preceding the return of Christ, when God will begin judging evil on this planet and driving people to Jesus Christ. I mean, many, many people are going to come to Christ during the tribulation. It's going to be the greatest ingathering of people coming to Christ that the world has ever known. Whether the church is raptured or not, the message is going to go out. So the tribulation, the purpose of it is to judge evil, to begin paving the way and clearing the world of evil, and to motivate people at the very end of history to come to Christ in large numbers. So that would be the tribulation, 7 years, and the last half of it we call the Great Tribulation.